Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Yo, Russell Brand. You say you want a revolution. Well, you know, we all want to change the world. You say you've got no solution. Well, you know, there's already a plan that takes money and power from those who hate and gives it to those who will no longer wait for you to cogitate, agitate, and debate whether or not wristbands and hashtags, oh so quaint, can stop the plunder and pillage by the conmen, hucksters, and banksters backed by the state. It's called Bitcoin, mate. There's your revolution. Stacy?
Yes, Max, it's revolution time, and this is what's happening in the UK. Tweet from Bitcoin's Berlin: the value of Bitcoin will skyrocket once people understand just how revolutionary it is. That quote comes from E516. And of course, that grabs the attention of many Western viewers because they're interested in speculation and prices rising for certain things, certain assets. But he's talking about the revolutionary idea of it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because Russell Brand is a very popular entertainer here in the United Kingdom, was on a very popular TV show, news show, and was talking about the need for a revolution, but he had no way to implement that revolution. He had no ideas other than to say that people are upset and need a revolution, which I think is pretty well understood. What he failed to mention is that Bitcoin is really that revolution. It started in 2009, and it contains within the Bitcoin protocol the seed of the revolution. I call it the currency of the resistance. It allows people, for example, in Greece or other countries, to create their own economy in ways that they want their economy to work for them, outside of a centrally controlled, centrally planned economy like you have in Britain or you have in the United States, controlled by kleptocrats. It completely avoids all of that. So I would hope that somebody like Russell Brand or somebody like this who has the eye of the media to step into the Bitcoin arena, which I think this will happen shortly, and then you'll see Bitcoin trading at 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. E516 does an excellent analysis. He predicts that Bitcoin will capture between 1 and 10% of the global Forex market, which implies a price of between $100,000 to $1 million per Bitcoin.
Speaking of the price rising, this is in the next headline here from a hedge funder. Fortress's Novogratz says Bitcoin will be, quote, worth a lot. And this is Michael Novogratz. He's the chief investment officer for Fortress Investment Group, which is a $55 billion hedge fund. And he says, put a little money in Bitcoin, come back in a few years, and it's going to be worth a lot.
Right. Well, we became aware of Bitcoin when it was about $1 a Bitcoin. We recommended it to viewers of Keiser Report when it was $5 a Bitcoin. It's now trading close to $200 a Bitcoin. It's been the best performing asset in the world, bar none. But this Fortress gentleman mentions he's a hedge fund and a private equity fund manager, and he understands that Bitcoin is now an asset class. Stocks, bonds, gold, silver, real estate, Bitcoin. It is an asset class. So every single one of those 10,000 hedge funds in the world who control trillions of dollars will need exposure to Bitcoin if they want to remain competitive. That's the bottom line. So these hedge funds will start nibbling into Bitcoin, and of course Barry Silbert's Second Market in New York has the Bitcoin Investment Trust, or BIT, that makes it easier for them to buy into Bitcoin. They will start outperforming their peers, and then their peers will have to get into Bitcoin as an asset class, and that's when you'll see the move into 5 and 6 digits.
Now, Novogratz says the reason why he sees it becoming worth so much is because of it growing as a payment system, displacing credit cards and PayPal and the likes of this, especially in the developing world, he says. So this is what we see in this next headline, Bitcoin Currency 2.0, and this is from Deloitte. And they mention the fact that it is growing widely across Kenya. For example, it's being integrated with the M-Pesa system, which is already a system of paying for goods and services with a mobile phone. So Bitcoin is being integrated into that system. In China, you have Baidu accepting Bitcoin. So they already have a mentality not part of this sort of feudal system where only the lords of banking can tell you what you're allowed to spend and how much interest and blah, blah, blah you're allowed to spend. But so they look at what happens when it gets adopted here in the West, Bitcoin. if Bitcoin were to achieve the mainstream adoption some believe it is capable of, the implications to retail banking would be seismic, with declining demand for traditional banking services like cash storage, payment, balance checks, international transfers, and foreign exchange, to name a few.
Right, well, there's one empire in the world, the American empire. It's backed by the US dollar, and the US dollar is 60% of all global transactions, and commodities like oil are traded in dollars and other commodities. And this dollar is backed by the US military. And in places like Africa, where they're trying to control the oil, which controls the US dollar and funds the US military, there's an enormous warfare going on, sponsored by American operatives like the CIA and these other folks, to keep the petrodollar alive and well. So Africa naturally wants to be decolonized from the American empire and the other of these states, China as well, by adopting Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is really the currency of the resistance and the revolution. This is what I think Russell Brand has failed to see, or all other celebrity pundits have failed to see, the revolutionary aspect of Bitcoin. So it's great for Africa. People in China who are worried about the dollar being debased by all the quantitative easing happening in the US are flocking into Bitcoin. We see the same thing in India. We see the same thing in Venezuela. We see the same thing in Cyprus, famously, when their currency collapsed and they poured into Bitcoin and the price skyrocketed.
Well, I think in Africa and China, it's not so much revolutionary, it's just independence. These people don't have the feudal lords of banking there. They're not in a system where, like this, here's growth fears as credit cards drive recovery. So we know the GDP numbers here are up. Everybody's saying recovery is here. Well, business lending is down 4%. You know what is up? By 30%? Personal loans. What are the personal loans? On credit cards. So here we have a system where you're being charged 20, 30% for credit card loans on 0% money that the government gives to the banks, the central banks give to the too big to fail banks, the 6 banks that control everything here, just like the 6 energy companies that control everything. With Bitcoin, they're saying you could live outside of the banking system, because Kenya and China, many of these people already live outside of the banking system, and they're proving that they can have their own GDP growth, their own economies, without any of the JP Morgans or Goldman Sachs there in the first place.
Right, well, the pound is a housing stock pound, just like the dollar is a petrodollar. The pound's driven by housing and housing speculation. 80% of the economy, if you take the financial sector and the housing sector and all the sectors that support the housing and finance sector, 80% of the UK economy is based on house price speculation. Only 13% is actually small to medium enterprises. So people in the UK who want to escape the colonization by bank and real estate developers, and they want to avoid a repeat of the 2008 crash, which is baked into the cake. There will be a spectacular real estate crash. It's in the pipeline here in the UK. It'll happen within 18 months. They would want to adapt Bitcoin into their day-to-day life immediately as a way to preserve purchasing power and to get out from the colonization from real estate speculation and city speculators.
So you're saying that it's the assignat, basically the modern-day assignat, which was the currency during the French Revolution, which of course was backed by the real estate of the church, and that went the same way that perhaps the revolutionary currency and times of the UK.
Well, remember, during the French Revolution, the assignat, which was the currency of the time, backed by real estate. Similarly, you see hedge funds confiscating real estate through mortgage fraud in places like the United States, and then trying to convince people that the dollar is now backed by hedge funds speculating in real estate. So it's become the assignat of our day. That famously crashed, and then France went into a deep, dark, frozen period of no growth whatsoever, which is awaiting all except for those who are fortunate enough to have positions in Bitcoin and gold and silver.
But now going back to Bitcoin, of course, CNBC and many financial tweeters on Twitter, you know, they only tweet about it when the price is either crashing or going up fast. So that's all they care about, is what the value, the price, the exchange rate to the US dollar is. Now, he's saying, and Deloitte, they're saying, while the currency itself, the future is not completely certain, they say, for now, though, it's not the price of Bitcoin we should be watching, but the real case studies of economic value emerging for those who choose to try it. It's a money game after all, and regulatory hurdles aside, the survival of Bitcoin will ultimately be determined by the true economic value it offers. So people choose to use it. It's not forced. The state doesn't back it. The state doesn't come to you and tell you, pay your taxes in this, transact in this, use this. You get to use it if you want. There's a giant flourishing economy in Kenya and China emerging around this. you could use it or not. And this is what they're saying is the economic value behind it.
Well, the trend is higher. And when you talk about the price and price movements, people always make the same mistakes. They tend to sell low and they tend to buy high. And of course, you need to discipline yourself to do the exact opposite. Buy low, and then if you're going to sell high. But when the price goes down, people get all fearful and they say, oh my God, it's going to go lower, so they don't buy. And then when prices go higher, they get all fearful that, oh my God, the price is too high. I can't possibly buy it now. The price is too high. Most of the people who are on the sidelines not buying Bitcoin today will start to buy Bitcoin when it gets over 1,000. And then a greater percentage of people will definitely plow into Bitcoin when it starts to get over 10,000. Because then the greed factor will kick in and people will realize that, oh my God, I'm missing the boat. And most of the economy around me is crumbling. Only Bitcoin is going to survive. Max and Stacy were correct. Rick Fogvina was correct. BitPay, Tony Gallipi was correct in recommending Bitcoin, and now they'll come into it at some stage. But they have yet to come in. They will, though, because it'll be the only game in town.
Now, many people calling for revolution also go around carrying photos of Chairman Bernanke. They believe in this system of a central bank system. The authorities tell you where you're allowed to transact. Well, here we have this system where those sort of people said, let's move our money. That will help us. That's our revolution when the financial crisis first happened. Let's move our money. Here in the UK, like 7 million people are customers of the co-op bank, the ethical bank. Well, here's the headline for you, Max. Bondholders poised to seize control of cooperative bank. Cooperative group admits plans to rescue banking arm will be material different to original proposals, with bondholders, including 2 hedge funds, poised to take control of the lender. Those are 2 U.S. hedge funds, Aurelius and Silver Point. They control 70% of the bank. 30% is in hands of the ethical part. So there you have it. That's what happens with the Ben Bernanke system.
As we said on this show many times, the Move Your Money campaigns, whether it was in the United States or France, are foolish because there is no bank immune from what we've just seen with the co-op bank. The hedge funds simply came in and stole all the money. There's only one refuge. Well, there's 3 refuge. There's gold, silver, and Bitcoin. That's it. If you're looking to decapitalize the banks and preserve your sovereignty, your personal economic sovereignty, you have those 3 choices. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, full stop. Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Simon Dixon of banktothefuture.com. Simon Dixon, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thanks for having me, Max. Delighted to be here.
All right, fantastic. Simon Dixon, the UK has introduced new legislation dealing with crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending. Tell us what we need to know about these breaking developments.
So, the UK was the founder of equity crowdfunding and debt-based crowdfunding. And so the FCA are currently in consultation with all the platforms and all interested parties to put together the rules and the regulation for crowdfunding moving forward. The important things is that we are very insistent that we keep the crowd in crowdfunding, because at the moment, for existing rules for the Financial Conduct Authority, they're trying to make it a game for just the rich and just what they call sophisticated investors.
Okay, so there's basically 3 types of crowdfunding. There is the rewards-based crowdfunding. People are putting, pledges of money, and they get maybe a T-shirt or their name on a credit. We had George Galloway on the show recently. He raised £160,000 for a film. That's a rewards-based crowdfund. Then there's peer-to-peer lending, which is another innovation here in the UK. I believe Zopa was one of the first, if not the first, or one of the first, to allow people to lend money to each other outside of the banking system.
Correct.
And then there's equity-based crowdfunding. And of course, you're one of the pioneers, one of the leaders, banktothefuture.com. And so the struggle or the fight or the consideration now is to keep the crowd and crowdfunding, as you point out. You don't want it to have it just for sophisticated investors, £1 million net worth or $200,000 in income, et cetera. You want to be able to have people put up small amounts of money. It seems to me that in this country, people throw away £2 billion a year on gambling. Why don't they put that toward investing in companies that end up creating jobs, Simon?
Well, I mean, that's our whole point, because in the UK, about 60% of jobs come from the small to medium-sized enterprise sector. And almost all of those jobs are created once a business raises finance. So if you can get more finance into the SME sector, then you could channel that £2 billion of online gambling into something that can potentially make the person wealthier by having assets and learning how to invest at a small level, and also the potential of the business creating jobs and reviving the economy.
You know, it's interesting because in this country, 40% of the GDP is tied directly to the banking sector. Another 40% is tied to essentially real estate sector. And that seems to be where the regulators are really concerned with, that they're concerned with the status quo, with the big banks, the too big to fail banks, and they're not, surprisingly, they're not really coming to the into the picture in terms of aiding the creation of new corporations using this innovative technique. Other countries seem to be jumping in. So New Zealand, Australia, the United States is going to have passed laws soon. So other countries, is the UK potentially going to miss the boat here?
Well, if we don't get the regulation right, then we could, end up losing it to another country. And so far, the FCA have shown in the consultation papers that they've just released that they're showing some kind of movement towards making sure that this isn't a game just for the rich and wealthy. What you have to remember is that they built their regulations, based upon the banking system. And a bank has kind of three fundamental reasons that a banking license gives them. Firstly, they own depositors' money. They become the legal owner of the money. They can spend the money as they wish. And they actually create the money in the first place.
Okay,
as well.
3 points there I want to reiterate. So when you deposit your money in a bank, they own the money.
Yeah, that's what a banking license does. They become the legal owner of the money.
They can do whatever they want with it.
They can spend it as they wish, and they allocate it through who they lend to.
And they create money from nothing through the fractional reserve banking system and other machinations.
Correct, yes.
So this system is really, is it any wonder then that the economy is, in the UK, you see a 4% decline in lending to businesses and a 40% increase during the same period, loans being created through credit card loans, et cetera. They seem to want the people to get into debt in a way that's highly detrimental to people. They don't want people to own anything in this economy. They want them to be into debt. That's the whole focus of this economy. Get into as much debt as possible.
Well, you have to remember that when banks are allocating essentially more than 95% of our money through when they create credit and they issue loans, they get to say where all the money is going. If you look at the big 5 banks in the UK, 40% of their loan book is allocated towards property, which is, reigniting economy temporarily based upon asset price inflation. The other 40% goes to financial speculation and serving the financial markets. Only 13% of it goes to small to medium-sized enterprise. The thing that's unique about the small to medium-sized enterprise is that over 60% of our jobs come from it. And also, it's where all productive, non-inflationary value can be created in our economy. So, while we could have regulations to make sure we keep the crowd in crowdfunding, we also have big change to happen at the bank because they're essentially allocating the lifeblood, the money of our economy.
All right, I want to kind of change gears a little bit here. I see crowdfunding as an alternative to the banking system the way it is, using tools, readily available tools. I mean, famously, Russell Brand was on TV recently calling for a revolution. It seems like crowdfunding and Bitcoin are part of that revolution. These are tools that people can use right away to get around this entrenched kleptocracy in the city of London. And apparently the regulators are, as they are in the United States, clearly, I won't speak for the FCA, but clearly SEC, when they're not watching porn in the United States, they're bending over backwards to help guys like Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein, who are just serial lawbreakers and criminals. But here in this country, there's been a campaign to move your money. And this has happened here, it's happened in the United States. People decided, we're going to take my money out of these too big to fail banks, the big 4 here in the UK, and I'm going to put it into Co-op Bank. And then now Co-op Bank, because of being attacked by these banks, they attack it, they fill it full of loans, they force it into problems. Then now the hedge funds have bought Co-op Bank. So is there the bank now is failed? It's owned by hedge funds. What are your thoughts?
Well, the unique feature about Co-op is that it was originally founded to be a social bank, and a social bank means that if you're going to allow a bank to create all of our money, and if the banks are directing the flow of our money, then why not have some kind of ethical stance to put it into things which are socially good for the economy? And that was the original stance. Now Co-op has got itself in trouble because it's operating off the same unsustainable Ponzi schemes that our existing banking system operates off. Therefore, to rescue them, and I was in Parliament discussing with some of the MPs that were questioning the CEO of Co-op recently, the hedge funds have to come on. Now the hedge funds, they have no remit for social good. They have no remit for that. They're profit at all cost. So therefore, when the owners become the hedge funds, what happens to the social mission and where does that money get directed?
Right, so as we've been saying on this show for years, this idea of moving your money from one bank to another is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, you're not really moving your money anywhere. It's staying still within the rubric of an extraordinarily corrupt system, whereas P2P lending, crowdfunding, rewards-based as well as equity-based is a genuine alternative to this. And the FCA, the regulator here in the UK, seems to be dragging their feet on this. Are there MPs now that are supporting it and can possibly mount a credible pushback and to overcome the FCA's resistance? Are there MPs in Parliament right now that are in your camp, essentially?
Well, you know, as well as running a business, I've spent a lot of my time meeting lots of the MPs across the UK, all parties, doesn't matter whether it's left, right, middle, whatever. They all have a remit to increase jobs, and they see this as a real viable stimulation of the economy, and you know, and so we've got lots and lots of support so far. There's been an APPG released, an all-party parliamentary group headed by Barry Shearman MP. To make sure that we keep the crowd in crowdfunding. George Galloway has shown great support on your show, and many other MPs are getting behind this as well, because really it is a way, because we're not creating money, we're not owning your money, we're not deciding where the money gets directed. This is the democratization of investing. This is financial inclusion. And if we take this to where it's meant to be, this is for the first time in history, who gets funded reflects the values of what the people say.
Right, you mentioned George Galloway. We're now exploring ways to fund £1 million fund using crowdfunding for his run to become mayor of London. And of course, there are considerations to be made, but we are now in the process of looking at that. There's different crowdfunding sites. I myself have started a crowdfunding site called StartJoin, which is launching in December. And we're going to definitely be supporting that Galloway run for mayor and this idea to raise £1 million. And of course, there's going to be local considerations for the way funds are raised for politicians, et cetera. But here you have the possibility of using essentially a capitalist tool of free market enterprise joined up with democracy to put somebody in office who's going to be working for the people, not somebody like a Galloway, not somebody like a Cameron or George Osborne, who clearly are in the pockets of big business and don't give a flying hoot about the people.
Well, what you have to remember is crowdfunding was built upon transparency. So who is actually investing, you get to see. Who is voting with their wallet, you get to see. And why? Because you're keeping the amounts really small. So, you know, through Bank to the Future, you can buy equity in a business or a startup starting from as little as £10. It allows, you know, complete financial inclusion for those at a very low level. So the potential of crowdfunding, not just for businesses, but for politics and for all sorts of other iterations, for social businesses, is a real force for good.
I want to, again, change gears a little bit. Mark Carney, who's now the new Bank of England head, he's just announced that the Bank of England will begin buying ever lower quality of assets from commercial banks. So in other words, the Bank of England's balance sheet has been expanded by 400%, which is the biggest expansion of any central bank in the world. They went from something like $400 billion in debts to 4 times that amount. He's pushing over $1 trillion worth of toxic debt that they're holding on the balance sheet. Now Mark Carney wants to push that to above £9 trillion worth of toxic debt. Is this going to work?
Well, again, this is kicking the can down the road a little bit further. All we're seeing right now, this is policies designed at keeping the status quo, to keep the Ponzi scheme, the fractional reserve banking system alive, to give it a bit more injection, to take it a little bit further, to inflate properties a little bit more so we can keep on more of the status quo. But in the end, it has to come to an end.
I mean, isn't Mark Carney just a hedge fund manager, and he's trading the balance sheet of the Bank of England like a hedge fund manager treats the balance sheet, money they have under management. They're gaming the system. They're looking around the globe, looking for easy money, easy trades. They can borrow money at 0% interest rates. The banks keep all the profits. They're not lending in the economy. Lending into the economy has dropped 4%, whereas the speculative bubble in real estate is up out of control now. And the wages, of course, are less than 1%. But anyway, so banktothefuture.com, it's available online, right? If people want to find out more, where do they go?
Yeah, right now we're going to banktothefuture.com. One of the things we're doing right now is we're actually eating our own dog food, and we're actually crowdfunding the growth of our company so that we can become an investment bank, a first crowd investment bank. And rather than giving that to the venture capitalists and giving it to the institutions, we want the people to decide whether that actually happens.
Good on you, mate. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
All right, Simon Dixon, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Simon Dixon of banktothefuture.com. If you'd like to get in touch, please tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.